From a young age, we're basically taught that constant connection is strength. The nonstop group chat, the flood of notifications, the endless scroll. We call it community. But what if we've got that backward? What if this constant need for connection isn't strength at all, but something much closer to dependency?
Let's just dive right in with this powerful idea from our source material. It just lays it out there. You call it community, it functions like dependency. Whoa, that's a pretty heavy statement, right? It totally forces you to stop and think about what we really mean when we talk about being socially strong.
So think about it. What really happens when all that noise suddenly stops? When your phone dies, or you're just totally alone for a bit? For a lot of people, maybe even most people, that feeling isn't peace. It's almost like a withdrawal. This really uncomfortable restlessness kicks in, like something's just off.
And that feeling? It is not an accident. It's actually a trained response. And it leads us right into what our source material calls the validation trap.
The psychology behind this is fascinating. It's something called variable rewards. And if that sounds familiar, it should. It's the exact same mechanism that makes slot machines so addictive. You get these unpredictable little hits of reward, a like, a comment, a bit of praise, and it creates this compulsive loop that just keeps you coming back for more. So you can really see the trade-off here. It's pretty stark. On one side, you have the promise of validation. It keeps you on edge, always anticipating. But your decisions, they're not really your own anymore, are they? They get hijacked by what you think other people want. And on the other side, you have the power of solitude. That's where you build real, genuine control, where you get to make decisions that actually line up with your standards.
Okay, so if this validation trap is the default for so many of us, what's the way out? What's the alternative? Well, our source has a great way of putting it. It's like running an internal operating system.
And this is such a powerful message. If you're someone who prefers solitude, you are not broken. You're not antisocial. You're just running on a different OS, a different operating system. And you could argue it's a much more powerful one. It's a complete reframe of how we're taught to see ourselves.
And you can actually see the difference in how people behave. Someone with that dependent mindset, they kind of need to know everyone agrees with them before they even speak. They're basically just asking for a reaction. But someone with that solitary mindset, they speak to test their own thinking. They're submitting a conclusion. They're not afraid of being challenged, but they're definitely not begging for approval.
So, this whole idea of an internal operating system, it isn't just some vague idea. It's actually built on 4 very distinct, very powerful traits. And these are traits that are cultivated in solitude.
Yep, it all boils down to 4 key traits.
So let's break them down. Here's our roadmap. First, having an internal reward system. Second, precise attention control. Third, what we call low reactivity under pressure. And finally, and this is a big one, walk-away power and frame control.
All right, first up, your reward system is internal. What does that even mean? It means your motivation, your drive. It comes from your judgment, from your standards, not from chasing applause. You do the work because you know it's the right work to do, period. Doesn't matter if anyone's watching. Okay, trait number 2. You learn to control your attention with absolute precision. And I love this metaphor here. You start treating your focus like it's private property, not some public park that anyone can just wander into. You become the gatekeeper. You decide what gets your mental energy, and you protect it from all that noise.
This idea isn't new at all. It actually has deep roots in Stoic philosophy. The Stoics had this term impressions, basically all the external stuff, all the thoughts that just pop into your head without an invitation. And they said, look, true power isn't about stopping those thoughts from coming. It's about that moment of choice, where you decide whether or not to agree with them, to give them your assent. And solitude, that's what gives you the space to widen that gap between the impulse and your reaction.
Trait number 3 is huge. It's about having low reactivity, especially under social pressure. On a biological level, this can literally mean lower levels of the stress hormone cortisol. But socially, what people see is this incredible calm, this stillness that everyone else just instinctively reads as control. You know that moment when things get tense in a room? The person who doesn't freak out, who doesn't react on impulse, that's the person with the real power.
It really makes me think of this quote from Nietzsche that just nails it. The strong carry their law within. They can stand alone with it.
See, it's not just about looking calm. It's about being so anchored in your own principles that the chaos outside just doesn't move you.
And that brings us to our final trait. And honestly, this one is a total game changer. It's called walk-away power. If you've ever studied negotiation, you might know this as your BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Here's the key. When your life is solid, when it functions well, even when you're alone, your best alternative is always strong. You can walk away from bad deals, bad jobs, toxic groups, because you just don't need them to be okay.
And that walkaway power, it lets you control the frame of pretty much any interaction. Think of it like Machiavelli's old metaphor of the fox and the lion. Solitude helps you become both. You get to be the clever fox who sees the whole board before making a move. And you also get to be the strong lion who just flat out refuses to fight on anyone else's terms. Both of those strengths are born and sharpened in solitude.
Okay, but let's be real. Operating like this isn't always easy. It's going to cause some friction. The second you decide to opt out of that whole validation economy, you can bet you're going to face some pushback, especially from people who are still hooked on it. So it's really important to learn how to translate what's really being said. When someone accuses you, "Oh, you think you're better than us," what they're often really saying is, "You're not as available to me anymore." Or if they call you cold or arrogant, the subtext might just be, "I can't hook you with my usual emotional drama." Once you understand this translation, you can stop taking it so personally. It's not actually about you.
But here's the thing. If you can handle that pushback, if you can stay the course, you unlock what our source calls the ultimate reward.
And the best part is this beautiful irony. The moment you stop chasing validation, you actually start attracting it. But it's from much higher quality sources, competent people, people who are secure in themselves. They see that signal. They don't see arrogance, they see strength. And those are the people who invite you into the rooms where the real important work actually gets done.
You know, this entire mindset can be boiled down perfectly by the Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius. He said, "If it is endurable, endure it. If it is not, stop complaining and take steps." I mean, that's it right there. It's a philosophy of radical personal responsibility, total agency over your own life.
So that really leaves us with one last powerful question to ask yourself. And be honest, when you look at what you do every day, your goals, what drives you, are you building a life or are you just building an audience?